beneath the brooding skies of the Wyoming wilds, where the wind carried whispers of forgotten dreams. A man named Harlan Graves stood at the edge of a cliff, his hands trembling not from the cold, but from the weight of a choice that would haunt him forever. His father's words echoed in his mind, sharp as a blade. "Weakness dies here, boy. Only the strong survive." But the creature before him, a skeletal mare with eyes like cracked amber, was no symbol of strength. She was a ghost, her ribs protruding like the bars of a cage, her breath a ragged hymn of suffering. Harlan had once believed in mercy, but debt, like a noose, had tightened around his throat. The bank would seize his land by week's end. This horse, this burden, was the last thread of a life he could no longer afford. With a rope rough as regret, he tethered her to a gnarled oak, its branches clawing at the twilight. "Ain't my fight no more," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. The mare's legs buckled, her whimper swallowed by the rising howl of wolves. Harlan turned away, his boots crunching over frost and guilt. 20 miles east, in a valley veiled by mist, Elias Kane knelt beside a fire, its flames dancing like restless spirits. A hermit by choice, he'd fled the world decades ago after betrayal that left his brother dead and his soul scarred. The wilderness was his confessor now, its silence his solace. But tonight, the wind carried a plea, a horse's cry, frail and fading. Elias froze. Animals don't cry unless death's already whispering their name. He followed the sound, lantern in hand, its light slicing through the darkness. The wolves came first, a pack of shadows with eyes like embers. They circled the oak, saliva glinting on jagged teeth. The mare lay collapsed, her neck raw from the rope, her sides heaving. Elias's jaw tightened. Someone wanted her dead. "Scram," he roared, swinging the lantern. The wolves hesitated, their growls a dissonant chorus. One lunge, Elias flung a knife. It struck the earth, a hair's breadth from the alpha's paw. The pack scattered, but their snarls lingered in the air like a curse. The mare's breath hitched as Elias cut her free. "You're stubborn, ain't ya?" he murmured, noting the fire still flickering in her eyes. "Ain't ready to quit yet." He called her Tempest, for the storm she'd weathered and the one she'd ignite. Harlan's ranch crumbled. The bank's men came at dawn, their boots staining his porch with mud and disdain. "Land's ours by sundown," sneered their leader, a man with a gold tooth and a sheriff's badge he didn't earn. Harlan's fist clenched, but his pride had bled dry. He packed a single bag and vanished into the woods, chasing the ghost of a horse he condemned. Meanwhile, Elias nursed Tempest with dandelion poultices and stolen moments of trust. She flinched at his touch at first, her wounds as much the soul as the flesh. But slowly she ate from his palm, her breath warming his callous hands. "You ain't like them, are ya?" Elias whispered, tracing the brand on her shoulder, a twisted G. "Someone marked you, but marks don't define you." Tempest's recovery was a tempest indeed. She shattered Elias's fences, galloped through his garden, and once pinned a mountain lion to a tree with her hooves. Yet at night, she'd nuzzle his shoulder, her heartbeat sinking with his, a rhythm of survival. Harlan found the oak first. The rope hung limp, the ground scarred by claws and courage. Guilt curdled in his gut. She fought. He tracked hoofprints deeper into wild, driven by a need he couldn't name, absolution perhaps, or punishment. When he stumbled upon Elias's cabin, the truth struck like lightning. There she stood, Tempest, her coat gleaming like polished mahogany, muscles rippling beneath scars. Alive, alive. Harlan's throat tightened. But Elias emerged, rifle raised, eyes sharp in the knife he'd thrown at wolves. "You," Elias spat, recognizing the brand on Harlan's saddle. "Graves. That you're doing." He gestured to Tempest's scars. Harlan's voice cracked. I didn't know she'd survive." Elias stepped closer, the rifle steady. Funny thing about creatures like her, the more you try to break, the brighter they burn. Tempest stamped, her gaze locking with Harlan's. In her eyes, he didn't see hatred. He saw a reflection, a man as shattered as a horse he'd abandoned. The wolves returned that winter, gaunt and desperate. They surrounded the cabin at midnight, their howls a dirge. Tempest stood guard, her nostrils flaring. Elias loaded his rifle, but Harlan gripped his arm. "Let me?" He stepped into the moonlight, unarmed. The alpha lunge, Harlan braced. But Tempest charged, her hooves a thunderclap. She reared, striking the wolf mid-leap. It yelped, retreating into shadows. The pack fled, outmatched by a horse who'd chosen mercy over vengeance. Elias lowered his rifle. Guess she's judge and jury both. Spring came, and with it, a letter. The bank had folded, its debts erased by a fire. Arson, the townsfolk whispered. Harlan knew better. Fate had granted him a second chance. He knelt before Tempest, pressing his forehead to hers. "I don't deserve you," he breathed. But Tempest nudged him toward the horizon, where the wild stretched endless and free. Elias watched, a rare smile softening his face. "Go on. She's telling you to live." Harlan rode west, Tempest strides, eating the earth beneath them. Behind, Elias whispered to wind, "You healed him too, didn't ya?" Strength isn't forged in cruelty or silence. It's born when we confront the storms within. Every creature, broken or whole, carries a spark of resilience. Sometimes, saving another is the bravest way to save ourselves. If this story stirred your soul, share it. Let it remind the world that even in the darkest nights,